You hear the birds, you feel the sun, and you see the color. It just brings you a little bit closer to your subject, I think, and it does reflect in the paintings that you've been outdoors. I think you can clearly see when somebody has done a plein air piece. I was actually living in England, and I was taking from an English instructor out of Oxford, and my watercolors became very tightened up, and because we were living on an Air Force base, a lot of the military personnel were actually living on the economy in thatched roof houses. And I did one for someone. Someone commissioned me to do a thatched roof house that they were living in, and when one person saw that, it kind of mushroomed from there. And the whole time I was in England, I was doing commission work of buildings, structures, castles, you name it. So then I started exhibiting there in England on the base. Actually, they had a nice little arts and crafts building. And so basically I got the itch there to start really thinking about doing it professionally. I'd been doing art since I was a kid, but professionally about between '83 and '86. Those were the key years. Then we moved to Georgia, and I continued with and started classes, teaching classes there, and exhibiting and doing a lot more serious art at that time. The best time to paint is either early morning or late afternoon, because your light is not going to shift nearly as great during those times. When you've got like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning till 1 or 2 in the afternoon, first you lose a lot of your shadows. And so I kind of set up knowing where the sun is going to go ahead of time. 2 to 3 hours in one location. You have to get your piece rendered within that time frame because your shadows change. And then your painting starts changing, because now you're fighting with changing shadows as it's moving. Know where your sun's coming, where it's going. I often carry a compass with me. I actually have a compass on my keychain, so I know, because if it's an area where I'm not familiar, if it's in the woods or something where I'm not familiar, and then I usually paint into the sun, because you don't want the sun on your canvas or on your paints. You need to be in shadow. If that's not possible and you're out in the open space, like at the beach or on the coast, often there's not a lot of shady spots. I use an umbrella, which attaches right to the pochade box. My dad built my first easel, which I still have and use today, so it's kind of a nostalgic thing. But I started with oils, so I think I kind of went full circle. I did a lot of watercolors in England, and during the time that my kids were very young, because it was just easier to clean the brushes and go. With oils, you have to take a lot more time. The plein air is important because you can capture the essence of the day firsthand. Cameras are not accurate, and the photographs that you print are not accurate, so it's better to catch it with your eye and with the paint being outside. So I usually work small outdoors, and then if I have one that I'm particularly fond of, I'll bring it inside and work it up in the studio in a larger piece, so that I'm still using the plein air study as the guide for the color scheme, at least, as I'm working. Albert Bierstadt, he was one of the Hudson River Valley artists, and that whole school of Hudson River Valley artists is kind of my inspiration. I really like their work. It's the traditional art. This piece was originally started on Plum Island in person, and didn't have a lot of time to do a lot on it, so I photographed it, some photos, and I'm using those now to kind of render the rest of the painting. I print 2 copies because one's a warm value and one's a cool value. Photographs don't always show exactly what you want, so you have to do a couple versions so that you get what you want out of the darks and what you want out of the lights. We often bring home unfinished pieces, and then that's where the photographs that we take on site can help us to finish any detail. You should be able to get most of the color down on site. You may not have a lot of the detail in that you want, and that's what you would finish in the studio. I'm working in oil paints. I've worked in a lot of different mediums, but I just seem to always go back to oils. It's just got a lot more density of color, and I guess you could say I'm a colorist. I love the color. I love mixing it. I love the feel of it, and I orchestrate the color changes using the different brushes, because they're all loaded with specific colors, so that it keeps me from having to constantly rinse. Lake Massabesic, it's just got a wide variety of subject matter. I like paths, and there's lots of paths there. The water, the lake, and you've even got a little bit of a peak of a mountain area to the backside. Massabesic is probably one of the most painted areas that I have, yeah, because I can just get different looks from it all the time. I think people want to see more of the traditional. I think they're tired of some of the abstract. And it's really only been, I would say maybe the last 10 years that it has turned around and there's been a revival of the plein air painters. There are a couple of ways of attacking it, and that's just to do like a drawing first and then put your color down, or just start right in with your color, and some do it both ways. I prefer to block in with just like a burnt sienna, just to get the drawing in, and then I paint right on top of that while it's still wet, and that works for me.